Hello, welcome back to another edition of All or Not According to Jack with your host, Jack Toledano. As you can see, I have the ring behind me again, so we have some more wrestling content. So, how this came about. So, my children, Sam, my daughter Sam, my son Jay, and my daughter Sam's now fiance George, they've made some suggestions for some series for me to watch. So first, Sam and Sam and Jay suggested that I watch this HBO series called Succession. Uh, great. Uh, in the annals of dirty, you know, corporate espionage and corporate takeovers and hostile takeovers and whatnot. 4 seasons, I believe 10 episodes per season. Excellent. Some comedy, but excellent stuff. I try to be well rounded. Watch a little science fiction, some drama, some comedy. The next thing that Jason got me to watch was this series on Apple TV called, or is Apple Plus, one of them, called Severance. You want to talk some science fiction and mind control. This is like a modern day Twilight Zone. It's really freaks you out. Well, how many? Oh, it was just one season so far, but I think it was 10 episodes, 8 or 10 episodes, but great. Uh, Not too much comedy, but a little scary at times. Really freaks the mind out a little bit. Uh, Gotta check it out. Really good. Um, and then, of course, George suggested that I watch and what we're going to talk about tonight, something called Dark Side of the Ring. So a little background about this show. So what I love about it is the fact that it is nobody that currently works for WWE. It's all people that have worked for WWE in the past and can't be bullied by Vince McMahon not to go on the air or risk getting fired to talk about the content. And as we get into it, you'll see why. Tonight is going to be part one of a two-part episode. So there are 4 seasons. We're going to cover seasons 1 and 2, which I just completed season 2 this afternoon. So and basically, I'm going to share my screen, and it's going to be basically all the episodes laid out in Wikipedia. So not going to use a PowerPoint. We're going to use Wikipedia for my presentation tonight. And I will talk about it as we move along. Let's get to it. And there we go. Dark Side of the Ring. Really ingenious. It's Dutch Mantel, Mick Foley, and mainly Chris Jericho. It's Dutch was season 1, Mick Foley, the one episode in season 1. Chris Jericho, season 2, narrated the episode. And as you know, Chris Jericho left WWE, so he can't be bullied by Vince McMahon. Again, this is not scripted, so please forgive me if I forget some wrestlers' names. I will try to remember everybody. So season 1, 6 episodes. Of course, there's Match Made in Heaven, Randy Macho Man Savage and Miss Elizabeth. Great episode. I've seen Randy Macho Man wrestle a few times live. When he first became a face, I saw him actually one of the few times my wife went with me. We saw him at the Nassau Coliseum. He headlined the event with Samoa #2. And, of course, he beat him with that flying elbow. Randy was a guy I really respected. And this was one of the better episodes. It was a damn shame, how his marriage to Miss Elizabeth basically, disintegrated, after many years. He put on the persona that he was, he was basically didn't treat her right, but he loved her nonetheless. Kept her employed even after their divorce in WCW. She died, untimely death, very sadly. And then he died as well from a car accident. But you know what? He definitely was a major player in the 80s. He's missed. Episode 2, the Montreal Screw Job. All about that. Bret the Hitman Hart, Shawn Michaels. Basically, Bret was offered a lot of money to come over to WCW, but instead Vince McMahon offered him this outlandish sum of $1.5 million a year for 20 years, which he then turned around and said, "We can't afford to pay you this, and I'll have to break the contract." So Bret took the offer with WCW. Then he couldn't, he had to basically, when you leave a company, you got to basically turn that belt over to somebody before you leave and, do it right. Unfortunately, his last night with WWE was at a pay-per-view in Montreal, Canada, and Bret didn't want to lose in his native country of Montreal. So he suggested that they, have some sort of disqualification and that he would turn the belt over the next night on Raw. But they didn't want to do that. They decided they were going to get that title off of him one way or the other. So they basically screwed him. Shawn Michaels put him in his own submission hold, the sharpshooter. So then, so he put him in his own, in Bret's sharpshooter submission hold, and they prematurely rang the bell, took the belt off of him. There are those who think it may have been a work, but seemed pretty real to me. Bret did have his own documentary about it. I've seen that as well. Both very well done. I feel for Bret, but happy that he made up with Shawn Michaels years later. This is definitely one of the best episodes, hands down. Killing of Bruiser Brody. So Bruiser Brody, going back to the 70s, so he wrestled. He was more of a freelancer. He went back in the days when you can bounce from territory to territory. I believe he was an AWA, NWA, all of them. He came to then it was called WWWF, and he came and he fought Bruno Sammartino. So now, here's a fact. First time I ever went to a wrestling card, I believe it was September or October of 1976. I had just entered 7th grade. I was 13 years old. On that card, the main event was Bruiser Brody challenging Bruno Sammartino for the title. And it was in a steel cage. This would be the only time that I've ever seen both Bruno and Bruiser live. Very memorable night. Never forget it. Of course, Bruno won. Bruiser, did the blade job. Bruno walked out of the cage, won the match, but very sad. Also in the 70s, I do remember he had something of a mini feud. Not should I even call it a feud? So basically, he didn't really sell that much when he was in WWE. I think the only person that I have ever really seen him sell to, and the the term sell means that you take a little pounding at, to the other guy. You let the other guy beat you up. He sold for Bruno. He sold for Andre the Giant in a 6-man tag team match. Other than that, he would do all the beating. Uh, I saw him, beat up Kevin Sullivan in his earlier days, and Sullivan got no offense. And uh, Jose Gonzalez, he was a Puerto Rican sensation, on the lower part of the card. He was, I guess, what you would call a jobber to the stars. Uh, he pretty much lost to, Bruiser Brody, and Bruiser was known for basically not protecting his opponents, and he beat the crap out of them. And it was rumored that Jose Gonzalez said to SD Jones, one of these days, I'm going to kill this guy. So fast forward to 1987 or 88, he actually did stab him to death. So sad. Rumor has it that Bruiser was actually buying into that territory in Puerto Rico, and I guess they didn't. I don't know if they didn't want him, or he held a long-standing grudge, but he stabbed him to death right in the shower. And Tony Atlas was very instrumental in talking about this episode, and he was the one who carried Bruiser out to the waiting ambulance outside, and they had something of a trial, but of course Jose was found guilty of was found not guilty by reason of self-defense, they say. But who knows if there was a real investigation? Who knows if there was, what the hell they did? But it sounded like a kangaroo court to me. Very sad, very sad. Especially the wife talking about it. Some of these episodes are not for the faint of heart. I gotta tell you, some of them very serious. We'll get to those. No comedy in this whatsoever. That was another favorite episode of mine. Last of the Von Erichs. I didn't really know the Von Erich family. Kevin, Kerry, David. I didn't really know them very well. They had the Territory World Class Championship Wrestling in Texas. They were the stars of that. Not much to talk about, really. That was probably one of the episodes that didn't really grab me, but whatever. Next episode, mysterious death of gorgeous Gino. He was also in WCCW. This one, I had never heard of Gino Hernandez, but great episode. Here's a guy who, he had a lot of charisma. What else can I say? He had a lot of charisma. He was, a heel. He was always talking about how great he was. He died. I think, trying to remember back, and again, this is basically a shoot interview. I don't have any notes. I think he was murdered, but again, very sad. The mother was on there. She, very felt very bad for her. This was actually an episode that I did enjoy. Last one, Fabulous Moolah. So, women's wrestling. So, back in the 70s and I would say the early 80s, you basically didn't really talk about women's wrestling unless you talked about the fabulous Moolah. She she was kind of like Andre the Giant in a way, where Andre had this aura about him where he never ever lost up until WrestleMania, and they kept it hidden. Uh, I heard he lost in Japan once or twice, but basically wipe it clean, wipe the slate clean. He never lost until WrestleMania 3 when he finally lost to Hulk Hogan. Same thing with Fabulous Moolah. Held that title for a long time, never lost it until finally 1983, 1984. Vince came up with this idea to kind of marry and call it the Rock and Wrestling Connection. You know, wrestling was starting to become really big, starting to really take off. Vince was buying up all these companies, and he was basically taking over the world of professional wrestling. So what did they do? They, I don't know. They talk about briefly about how they melded with Cyndi Lauper, you know, who she was just becoming popular in the world of pop music at the time. Girls just want to have fun time after time. So they decided to have the war to settle the score. So in addition to having Hogan against Piper, they also had the fabulous Moolah face Wendy Richter. And who would have ever known that Vince must have paid Moolah a lot of money to have her drop that title to Wendy Richter. You know, but basically it was overshadowed by a few people making allegations of how fabulous Moolah was a Svengali, how she trained all the women. She kept them at her compound. She promoted them out to, you know, to all the different promoters, but they also had to pay like a percentage, I don't know, 20-25% of their salary, which probably wasn't much at the time, to Moolah. And you know, Wendy was one of the smart ones. She negotiated her own contract with Vince McMahon and said, no, that money's coming to me. It is not going to Moolah. So very interesting story, but probably my two favorites, or rather my three favorites, the first three, the Randy Savage, the Screwjob, and Bruiser Brody. So that is episode, you know, season 1. Enjoy. 45 minutes each. Cool stuff. Season 2. I got to tell you, I had to look away a few times at the Chris Benoit story. They had to do that in 2 parts. So Chris Benoit, I saw him wrestle once with my family. You know, all I remember is I forget who he faced, but he won the match. He won it with his patented flying headbutt. In part 2, you know, they talked about his friendship with his very close friendship with Eddie Guerrero, and how when Eddie died, you know, heart attack, who knows if it was brought on by drugs, it basically, Chris Benoit's world crumbled. Then they talk about he had a double murder suicide. He murdered his wife and his son. I'm not going to really talk about it too much. You have to watch it, but yeah, very, very sad. I did gain a new respect for Vicky Guerrero, because Vicky basically took the side of the wife and the son and said, look, if you're going to kill yourself, you know, it's sad, but don't kill other people. Very, very sad. Had to look away a few times. Episode 9, The Life and Crimes of New Jack. So New Jack, who was billed from being from Harlem, New York, African American. He fought in ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, a couple other companies, but he brought a real extreme style of fighting. And here's a guy who would hard way beat the shit out of people in the ring. This one guy, I forget his name, but he made them, a young guy who was 21, who said he was 21 years old, but passed himself. He was 17 in real life, but passed him off as 21 to genius walrus there, Paul Heyman. He actually went up to New Jack before the match and said, "Oh, could I get some offense in?" That must have set New Jack off, because let me tell you, New Jack off. Har, har, har. Didn't mean it to come out that way. But so New Jack basically beat the living shit out of him, cut him with a razor. Guy had to go to the hospital. I think he had some permanent scarring. He died a couple of years later from complications of liposuction. That was another one I had to look away a few times. New Jack actually got charged with assault on a couple of occasions. There was another guy he fought where he threw him off a goddamn 20 or 30-foot scaffold. How the guy survived, I'll never know. Yeah, I literally had to cover my face a few times. That was actually one of my favorite episodes, just how chilling, and it was like watching a thriller almost. So next episode 4 of season 2, the Brawl for All, actually turned out, but the episode was better than I thought. Premise with that was that they took 16 wrestlers, and this is so a lot of talk with Vince Russo and Jim Cornette. Vince Russo, who was basically a fan like me, pitched the idea. Let's have he heard JBL one time talking about, in real life I could kick everybody's ass in this locker room. So he said, let's have like a shoot boxing tournament. So they picked 16 people out. One of those people was Bart Gunn, was in a tag team with Billy Gunn, the Smoking Guns, they called him at the time. As it turns out, so they brought in this guy, Dr. Death Steve Williams, who they wanted to push him up to the top eventually and have him work a program with Stone Cold Steve Austin. But funny thing happened. Things didn't turn out like they planned. Bart Gunn basically went through the whole roster, the whole tournament like a hot knife through butter. He beat JBL. He beat Dr. Death Steve Williams, injured the guy. After that, they couldn't push him, so they had to find other programs for Stone Cold Steve Austin. He ended up winning the tournament. He wasn't the guy they wanted to win the tournament. So what did they do? I mean, they screwed the guy. Shame on you, Vince McMahon. Shame on all of you. Shame on you, Jim Ross, for fucking this guy, basically. All he did was, they said it was real. They said, got to go out there and try to win. They made it sound like, Steve Williams, you won't have problems with Bart Gunn. So what did that do? It motivated him even more to, basically woke a sleeping giant. So shame on you. What'd you do? You hired Butterbean to beat the guy up in one of the WrestleManias to teach him a lesson? That's fucked up shit, man. Shame on you, Vince McMahon. Episode 5. shame on you again, Vince McMahon. Uh, we know what Jimmy Snuka meant to the wrestling world in the early 80s, how popular he was, how loved he was. I saw him 4 times. He was great wrestler. People loved him, loved his high flying ability, his mystique. But, you know, the death of his girlfriend, Nancy Argentino, very suspicious. At the end of this episode, there are some allegations that come out from, they tried to bury the autopsy. Vince McMahon, it suggested that he paid some people off to bury the investigation. Again, shame on you, Vince McMahon. At that time, I guess he felt he had to bury it, otherwise his whole empire could have crumbled. So nobody knew until a couple of years later. Jimmy Snuka had some drug problems, and basically what ended up happening, they finally punished him by having to send him away for a while. Basically, they worked it out so he was in a program with Roddy Piper, and they had Roddy Piper kayfabe injure his neck in a match at Madison Square Garden. So that was the last you saw of Snuka for a while. But I can't say that was my favorite. One of my favorite. It's just the outcome. Vince McMahon, I want to choke you. Next one, assassination of Dino Bravo. Dino Bravo was another wrestler I remember from the 70s. He was in a tag team with Dominic DeNucci. They were tag team champions. Went away for a while, wrestled around the country, wrestled up in his native Montreal, where he had his own company for a while. Unfortunately, Vince McMahon gobbling up companies left and right, hired away his top talent. So Dino's company, our International Championship Wrestling, I think it was called, he finally had to take the leap and, made a deal with the devil. Came back to WWE. Here's an Italian guy from Montreal, dyes his hair blonde. Unfortunately, after his career sizzled in I'd say in the early to mid 90s, basically, he left WWE, didn't know what to do with himself, got involved with organized crime, they say, selling illegal cigarettes, illegal alcohol, and he was basically assassinated. Suggested that it was a hit by the mafia of Montreal. On speculation. I'm not going to point the finger at anybody, but again, point the finger at Vince McMahon, who basically ruined the guy's business. So you fed him for 10 years, and then you know what? Went home. They say that wrestlers, they don't have a 401k, they don't have a pension plan, so had to support himself some way. That was a good episode. So far, my best episodes are actually the New Jack and Brawl for All. Episode 7 was a good one also. Dr. D. David Schultz. I mean, he is a man who basically all he did was try to protect what they call kayfabe. That's a term that they use for protecting the wrestling, the mystique of wrestling. Basically, they didn't want people to know that it was fake, that they faked it, and that it was predetermined, and that they weren't really beating each other up; they were faking it. But and again, Vince McMahon, he basically suggested to there was a card at Madison Square Garden, and John Stossel, who was a reporter for ABC, was basically trying to expose wrestling like he exposed other things. So basically, it almost sounded like Vince suggested to, take care, he's going to interview you, take care of this guy, almost as if he's suggesting to, to kind of rough him up, which David Schultz did. He smacked him twice. He didn't just smack him, he boxed his ears. He injured the guy. And there was a settlement, I think for like $250,000, but of course, there had to be a fall guy. So what did Vince do? They made David Schultz the fall guy. After you basically suggested to go rough the guy up, you fire him. Bullshit. Fortunately, David Schultz ended up better off than Dino. He started his own, he became a bounty hunter, and supposedly was very good at it. So kudos, David Schultz. That's that. Another great episode. So number 8, Cocaine and Cowboy Boots, Herb Abrams. So basically there was this federation called UWF. Universal Wrestling Federation, from 1990 to 1996. So Herb Abrams, basically, he's a guy, and that's his face. He was basically the wrestling promoter, and he was basically a fan. He had a lot of money, and kind of like a modern day Tony Khan. Well, rather, Tony Khan's the modern day Herb Abrams, and you can definitely see some similarities. Unfortunately for Herb, very quickly, so he was having problems paying his wrestlers. He had some big names there. He had Bruno there for a while. He had Mick Foley. He had some other superstars. B. Brian Blair from the Killer Bees. WWE fame. Basically, here he is. He'd have these pay-per-views, and there would only be 200-300 people in the arena. He had a pay-per-view in Las Vegas, I think in the MGM, and there was 300-400 people in the arena. I was like embarrassed for this guy. Again, he basically took all the money and snorted it up his nose. They say that drugs and alcohol are a disease. Definitely was. It's a wonder anybody bought into what he was doing. So that was a very interesting episode. Last Ride of the Road Warriors. Road Warrior, Hawk and Animal. Look at that. So I remember them. They were in Georgia Championship Wrestling for a while. That's how I heard of them. Years ago, before internet, you only had the magazines, and I would see them on the cover of the magazines, and I'd read about them. And that's kind of how I heard of them. So then they came to the WWE finally. They changed their name to the Legion of Doom for a while. Unfortunately, Road Warrior Hawk had some drug problems, and he went away for a while, and then he died. It was a recurring theme with a lot of these wrestlers, with the pain pills, and they've got you on this crazy schedule that you're traveling, what's it, like 310 to 320 days a year, or at arenas and fighting, and you got to keep going, otherwise you fall down the cart if you're away for a while. And they take pain pills, and they self-medicate with cocaine and whatever else, and A lot of these guys became drug addicted. It's sad, very sad. Last one, and this one that really, really very sad. And I knew about this story from the very beginning when it happened. You know what? I wasn't able to really afford the pay-per-views back then, so but I did hear about it right after the pay-per-view on the news. Popular wrestler dies as at an arena in Kansas City, Missouri. Turns out it was Owen Hart. I'm like, oh my God. Oh, my heart just broke for the Hart family. I think you know the story. Uh, so Brett had left WWE. They wanted to keep Owen. So what do? They didn't know what to do with him, so they give him this stupid ass gimmick. Uh, the blue blazer. You know, stupid enough as it is, and he was conflicted, but man of his word, he honored his contract. So then they tell him he's got to go up to the catwalk on top of the arena, and the harness malfunctioned and fell to his death in the arena, 50 in the ring, 50 feet below. Again, I blame you, Vince McMahon. Uh, you know, every what's his name? Jim Ross spoke out about it towards the end there. But you know what? Why didn't you stand up to Vince at that time? Same with you, Jim Cornette. Somebody, granted, your jobs were probably on the line. Vince is a bully, but maybe you could have saved this guy's life. So shame on all of you. My heart just broke for his wife. I mean, they talked about, even the Hart family, some people were conflicted about her suing the WWE because some of them make their living in wrestling. Brett went back to WWE. They don't mention his name, but I wonder where he stood with all of this, because he actually did go back and he actually got, I'm happy for him that he shook hands with Shawn Michaels in the ring, and bury the hatchet kind of thing, and it seemed very heartfelt, and I was overjoyed about that. But then he got into a program where he finally got to have his quasi comeuppance against Vince McMahon in a fight against him. But you know what? He didn't do it for free. He made some money off of it. So you have to wonder. Not that I'm saying that, you do have to understand that Brett has to support his family too, and he has to go on. I guess, what the hell's his name? Goldberg saw to that, that he had to retire, but for a while, he was still, trying to make a name for himself and continue on. But yeah, this was very sad, very hard to watch. So my top episodes of season 2, not for the faint of heart, the Owen Hart accident, the Chris Benoit double episode, New Jack, and WWF Brawl for All. All great. Check it out. I know I probably talked your ear off. I'll stop sharing. Season 3 and season 4 coming up when I get a chance to watch them all. Not sure when that will be, but I hope you enjoyed this. Definitely worth checking out. It's on Hulu. Seasons 1 and 2 are also on Tubi, free TV if you can deal with the commercials. Check it out. Jack Toledano, All or Not according to Jack. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions on anything I didn't cover, please reach out. put your comments in the comments section below. And I will talk to you soon. Have a good night. Bye all.